Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Down But Not Out, the show where founders tell their real life stories of entrepreneurial resiliency. I started this show after my one company, VisitorQ, was dealt a death blow by Google that led to us almost losing all of our clients and all of our revenue. And that would have happened if it wasn't for the hard work, determination, and resiliency of our team. I love a good underdog, so these stories resonate more with me than the story of the $1 billion exit or the story about how your company IPO'd. These are stories of grit, meant to inspire you, the listener, to keep fighting. As entrepreneurs and business owners, we will have our backs against the wall multiple times. So let hearing these stories be your fight song, your hoorah, that thing that gets you out of bed on those tough days. This episode is brought to you by my company, VisitorQ. Identify the anonymous companies visiting your website so your sales team can follow up with them. Start your 14-day free trial at visitorq.com. Now, let's dive into this episode. Today, I'm joined by Brian Foster. Brian is a serial entrepreneur, investor, and mentor with several exits under his belt. His most recent exit was with InnoSoft Canada, a company he co-founded in 2017 to Constellation Software. InnoSoft provides recreation management software to some of the largest universities and institutions across North America. Currently, Brian is the co-founder of the RH Accelerator and general partner of the 519 Growth Fund. Brian is also a board member to several technology companies, a lover of competition sports, and has future plans to work remotely from his sailboat. Thanks for joining us, Brian. I hope I did an okay job with the introduction, but let's have you give yourself an introduction as well for the audience.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nick. I really appreciate it. I love the topic today. I think it's important. It's an important story to tell for people. My background, really it started back. I worked at the university here in London, Ontario for about 10 years. And working my way up to eventually being the director of IT for graduate studies, which was a bunch of different departments had graduate programs, and they kind of funneled into the main department. And I was kind of responsible for all the kind of IT needs, PeopleSoft implementation, back in the day, putting in the first online graduate application process. So that was kind of where I was. But during that time, I got to meet a fellow named Jeff Berg, who had created a piece of software for the recreation department, and I happened to be supporting the rec department just because my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, worked there. So I was providing IT services. Got really intrigued by what Jeff was doing with this new piece of software that he had built for campus recreation.
And Jeff didn't work for Western, did he, at the time?
He was independent. Independent. I was working at Western. And then Jeff hired me to do an implementation and training at the University of Toronto because I'd gotten to know the software a little bit at Western. And so that was kind of my first kind of taste of what it was like in that kind of a little startup. So I did that with them, which was kind of exciting. And then the next one was McGill University. And so I actually went solo to do that one on my own, which was an experience in itself. But I kind of got the bug at that point that I was really interested in what that company was doing. And that company was called B&W Software. So fast forward a few years, I was still essentially bootstrapping it. So I was, a couple of the founders were bootstrapping it. Jeff was kind of in it full time.
Yeah.
There was a couple other staff members at the time, and we were just trying to get this thing going. And then there came a fork in the road where I had to make a decision. Either I was going to jump into B&W full time, or I was just going to kind of stay at Western.
And were you like a contractor that they were using?
Yeah, just a consultant. I was I didn't
no
really
equity either. Yeah.
Not at that point. So at that fork in the road is really when I had the opportunity. I could either buy into B&W or I could take this other path. So I took the leap of faith, had lots of support from my wife, to say, yeah, like let's do this. And so I kind of jumped into BMW back in 2001. And then, yeah, I really became responsible for everything that wasn't IT related. And I didn't really have a lot of formal business training.
Yeah.
But I was decent at selling because I could kind of explain complex kind of, software things to a layperson.
And you
So
were in that position at Western that to the person you're selling to now, right? Or close to? Like you understood that person's persona in a way?
Yeah. So I understood campus recreation. I had actually worked at campus recreation kind of part-time. My wife had worked there. So I really did understand campus recreation.
Yeah.
And so we had really kind of built a purpose-built enterprise piece of software for a niche market for campus recreation. So at that time, and this would have been in the late 90s, there was really nothing out there that had been built for campus recreation because it was university settings were different. It wasn't kind of like a private enterprise like a fitness gym or like a YMCA, YWCA. It was different. And so the software was obviously built to kind of play in that world. So we were kind of, we had 4 clients in Canada and sales slowed, but we were persistent. We kept it really, really, really lean. Eventually I closed my first deal down in the US, which was the University of Pennsylvania. And they ended up being a really great reference client. And I think I sold 13 deals over the next, no, I'm wrong there. It was 19 deals over the next 13 months.
Yeah.
And then we had other issues, which was delivering, implementing, supporting, and it was starting to become a real challenge. But we continued to grow that business, just a nice kind of, I would say thoughtful growth. Had some, we can certainly talk about challenges, and we'll talk about what the near-death experiences were, even with BMW. But we grew that up to about 40, I think we were just over 40 universities and colleges kind of in various parts around United States and Canada. And we were also working with, I think, 7 different YMCAs in Ontario. So we had this kind of 2-pronged business going. In amongst, I was trying to raise capital so that I could help accelerate, bring on more bodies, and really just kind of put some fuel on the fire.
Did you have a title? Like it sounds like a CEO position, or?
Yeah, so I became a kind of the de facto CEO. Like I'm not, so I was kind of running everything, but Jeff and I had a very kind of 50-50 approach with BMW. Jeff certainly owned more of the company than I did. I had a good stake in it, but Jeff was really the founder.
Yeah.
But then I started to do a lot of these things. So I ultimately ended up becoming the kind of the CEO. Although that was, I think, by default, not necessarily that I applied for that role.
Yeah, no choice.
And so I was out there trying to raise money, but it was post-bubble.
Yeah.
And our revenues were still, like, they were okay, but they weren't great. So, it's this typical story. VCs won't touch you, private equity won't touch you, banks want your firstborn. And we just kept getting no's and no's and no's and no's. But I kept pitching while I kept selling. And then eventually I got a yes from an investment opportunity. And literally within 2 weeks of that, I was approached by a company out of California who had heard about us because of our YMCA foray.
Yeah.
And within a week after that, we had an offer to acquire the company. And so we chose to go down that path.
Yeah.
And we ended up selling the company. We ended up selling the company. And it was, to say the least, it was a difficult experience. The due diligence was difficult, not overly difficult, but difficult enough. But post-acquisition was not very good.
Yeah.
So Jeff and I, I ended up being there for not very long, like maybe 4 months.
With the company that acquired
the company that acquired us. I stuck around for a little while, but then my wife and I moved to Connecticut, and in all that process, I had gotten to know Good Life Fitness through a friend of mine who was their director of IT. And I can't remember the exact sequence of events, but we were out for lunch one day, and he said, "Yeah, we're really looking for a club management system. We've looked at all these solutions, but nothing really, fits the bill." And so Jeff and I put our heads together, and we had acquired a little company through just basically a shared exchange
Yeah.
with the founders, that they had built this kind of .NET framework add-on that I'm not the technical person that could really build rapidly. So back
Yeah.
in the day, this was much more revolutionary, because this was like early, like 2005. So we presented to Good Life Fitness to say, "Hey, we can build you your club management system." And so we presented to them. We signed a development deal with Good Life Fitness, and we opted to do it at cost in exchange for to continue to own the IP.
Yeah.
Because our ultimate plan was that we would go back to the university and college market, because the company that had acquired our first company had just not done a good job with it.
Yeah.
And we always enjoyed campus recreation. It was a really good market to be in. And so we said, okay, we'll build this club management system with Good Life, and then when we're done with that, we'll go back to our old market and see if we can do a good job again.
No
So
non-compete from the acquiring company, or it had run out by this point?
yeah, it had run out. So we basically had a 1-year non-compete.
Yeah.
But by the time we actually even put a product on the market, so we sold InnoSoft BMW in 2004,
Yeah.
and our first product back on the market was in October of 2008.
Yeah.
So we were way past the non-compete.
Yeah.
So Good Life was a good partner, although a challenging partner. And I wouldn't say that we had a near death, although I would argue that we got pretty close a couple of times. A very demanding customer. Naturally, they needed to be, as the largest privately held fitness chain in Canada, and one of the largest in the world. But it was a challenging relationship between the two of them, between us and them. And so we chose to just say, okay, we're finished. You can take your code, but we're going to continue down this path. And so I went back to some of our original partners with the first company.
Yeah.
So Ohio University and Dalhousie University. And I approached them and I said, "Hey, we're back.
Yeah.
I think we've got something better."
Yeah. Were they still using the original?
They're still using the same product.
Yeah.
And I said, "Can you take a look?" So they looked at it. They really liked it. We invited them down to London. We went through everything. And then they basically became I would say, our foundational partner. So they agreed to kind of front us some money to get this done. And that took us about another 9 months. And then, so this would have been like fall of 2007, late 2007. And then we worked with them to kind of, get it more campus rec focused. And we launched Ohio University in October of 2008. And then we launched Dalhousie in the summer of 2009. So very, very lean.
Yeah.
We literally it was really, really bare bones. Jeff and I had decided that we did not want to take any outside money. We wanted to remain whole. We wanted to kind of chart our own path and our own destination. But it got tough. That doesn't sound very good English. It became very difficult. So we did find, I would say, a very generous local angel who supported us at a critical stage in the company.
In like 2008, 2009, this early stage with one or two clients.
Yeah, it was like in that 8, 9, where we just didn't have enough clients to kind of meet. Like we had to have enough staff to build, but like there just wasn't a lot of, like, they were fronting us some money, but not a ton of money.
Yeah.
And then we just really focused on, okay, let's get to 5 clients, let's get to 10 clients, let's get to 25 clients. And then it was just kind of a methodical approach at that point. And so that's ultimately what happened, is that we just kept hitting the 25 and then the 50. And then, so it took us, probably the first 5 years were the hardest, for sure. Very lean. And then we kind of tipped over where we were socking away cash every month. And things, we started to become well known in the industry. And so we eventually got to a point where we became the industry standard for campus recreation. So I think InnoSoft right now is 350, 60 universities and colleges using, and most of the big ones.
I was about to say, there's got to be a lot of the big ones, right?
Yeah, most of the big ones you would think of are using a Fusion. So I was fortunate back in 2017, we sold that company to Constellation Software, which is a very large publicly traded company in Canada, but has a really great track record of their acquisition. We really liked the story personally, given our first experience where they acquire a company. They acquire the company, they pay up front in cash, but they let the company do their thing. So I stayed on for a little while. I didn't have to, but I wanted to learn more about how they run their businesses. And InnoSoft continues to do really, really well. There's more staff than there was. And like, it's a good story as far as legacy. And I feel really good about that part, the acquisition, where I don't look back and think somebody else took it and merged it into something else or dropped it. Like our first company, they essentially dropped it, and within about a year and a half, like everybody was gone.
Which almost not let you start InnoSoft, but opened up the market a bit to start InnoSoft after, right? A few years after, to win back those clients that you, or some of them at least, that you had.
It's I've reflected on that, and Jeff and I have spoken about it too, that it was probably, in hindsight, the best thing for us, because what it allowed us to do was to start fresh while not having to support a legacy product. So we essentially got somebody else to fund the development of a new next-gen product. Go back to our original market with a better product. And ironically, and this is a bit of a side note, but the company that acquired my first company sold BMW to another company.
And it's not around to this day, is it?
I think there's still one client using it, but don't quote me on that. But the CEO of that company, I got a call one day out of the blue. I'm trying to think of the year now. It was like 3 years after the fact. We were in the process of building what became known as Fusion. And he said, "Is this Brian Foster from BMW Software?" And I said, "Well, who's asking?" And he said, "I'm such and such. I'm the CEO of such and such. We've acquired the rights to the BMW S1 solution." I said, "Oh, you have?" I said, "Sorry to hear." And he said, "We don't know what to do with this solution at all. Like, we don't know how to support it. It's in Fox Pro. We don't know anything about it. Can you help?" So ironically, I said, "Well, I think we can actually do something for you." So I signed basically a support agreement with them.
With InnoSoft.
I said, "You have to get sign off from the company that acquired you, but we struck a deal where we supported the product, but I made it clear that I'm going to be going back to sell my new product." And he said, "No problem.
That's crafty.
We just need to support these people," or because I assume they were worried about other things other than just the software not working. And so we did that. So we ended up supporting about 18 clients on our old product. All of those
buyback.
Of those 18 clients became Fusion clients. Actually, I think every single one of our original clients eventually became a Fusion client. Eventually. Took a little while. Some of the bigger schools were, they were hesitant, I would say, because, like, you're a smaller company in Canada, it's a risk. Like, this is mission critical software. It runs your day-to-day operation. They're like, we don't want to go through another BMW software fiasco. I'm pretty sure one director told me that. And I'm pretty sure our competitors were saying, I remember one of our competitors were saying to our potential clients, you don't want to get on the Brian Foster train
I was
wreck,
about
do
to
you?
say this might have kind of hurt your
Yeah,
reputation a bit. Yeah.
those were her exact words. She would say,
Yeah.
you don't want to get on the Brian Foster train wreck, do you? Anyways, we outdid them all. We, at the end of the day, we became kind of the standard.
Yeah.
But it's because we kept focused. Like, we didn't try to go into different markets. We knew what our sweet spot was. We knew where we should target first.
Yeah.
And I've told this story to many people. We knew universities and colleges between 10 and 15,000 who don't have a legacy system, who are using multiple different systems, where Fusion is just going to look like a godsend.
Yeah.
And that was our target. We didn't want big schools, and we didn't want small schools. This is where we're going to target. And that's ultimately how we did it.
And you did very well in that.
And then we had some really good early adopters that supported the product. So that's the journey of ultimately ending up with the Roundhouse Accelerator.
Yeah.
So.
And and then you had the RH Accelerator now, and the 519 Growth Fund, and a lot of great success after InnoSoft as well. And then in this InnoSoft journey, B&W to InnoSoft journey, I know that you have a few down but not out stories, and we had to kind of pick through the one that you think would be best for the audience. So walk us through kind of where that fit in, and what year, and kind of where the company was at that time as well.
Sure. I think every startup, certainly in software, I would say that every founder kind of goes through like what feels like death by the thousand little cuts.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly learning. But we probably had 3 kind of near death, and then the one that I ultimately decided to talk about today was one that's not talked about very often. So oftentimes in these companies, it's a financial thing that essentially kills your business. You haven't cash flow properly, or something unexpected happens. Some people might get sued. You had another story about somebody
multiple
got into that.
Yeah, it usually comes down to revenue, right? Yeah.
It usually some type of a revenue. So either through your own fault or through something out of your control. And we had those. We had many. My accounts were frozen. I had to borrow money from my uncles and my aunts.
I've heard these.
Like there's, my credit cards maxed out. All those things that were which we had to get. But probably the one that one of them that really got close to killing us was what ended up being shareholder disputes.
Yeah.
So even in our first company, we had taken on some outside shareholders to do a little bit of fundraising on the first company. And when we went to sell the company, that was very, very difficult process. We couldn't get everybody on board.
Yeah.
And that was difficult. But with InnoSoft, the company actually started out as an InnoSoft LLC out of Delaware. So that's where it started.
What was the reason for Delaware? Just because you worked on American companies?
I had moved to the US. So I was living in the US. And when these conversations started to happen with Good Life, we set up InnoSoft LLC through Delaware. And that's actually where this development contract was assigned. So that started rolling along. And then we were essentially outsourcing our development to our Canadian people.
Yeah.
Right. And so anyway, I can't remember exactly. I was having a conversation and somebody said, you might run afoul of tax rules. So you may want to think about how best to proceed.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to get into all those details, but I was coming back to London so much that I just said to my wife, I said, this looks like there's some momentum here. I don't think we can do this. So she was reasonable or supportive to say, I'm okay moving back. So we moved back to Canada. And when we did that, we took on a couple of other equity partners in the company. So there ended up being 5 of us as equity partners when InnoSoft Canada was formed. When we transferred the agreement from the US entity to this newly established entity in Canada.
Yeah.
And so that was fine. And then as things progressed, there started to become some tension within these 5.
And what's a rough split of these 5? Like, are we talking 2 are in the 30s or?
Yeah, so the 3 founders, so myself, Jeff, and another individual had about 66 and a bit percent, so 2/3.
Yeah.
And these other 2 individuals had the other third.
The other third, yeah. Roughly evenly split in those.
The 3 were even, and the 2
Yeah.
were even.
Okay. Yeah.
But tensions started to mount
Between the 2 groups of people.
So what ended up happening was the 2 new folks weren't seeing eye to eye with the 3 founders.
Yeah.
And that tension started to occur.
Yeah.
Within the group. And in and amongst this, we had signed this new shareholders agreement. There was intentions that were made about what go forward might look like. And then there was an event that occurred. And again, I have to be very careful what I say.
Yeah, I can tell you're being a bit guarded. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a tipping point that the sides broke. And the way that the original shareholder agreement was struck was that essentially those 2 neutered, essentially, I don't like that word, but made it a stalemate.
Yeah.
So nothing could ever happen. We needed both of them, or we needed one of them to be with us in order to do anything.
And when you mean anything, you mean spend X amount of money, bring on X amount of investor, open a bank account, do like that kind of, that regular shareholder stuff.
So if you go in, like, and it depends on the shareholders agreement or what it looks like, but this was a pretty onerous unanimous shareholders agreement.
Yeah.
You essentially had to have unanimous consent on almost anything.
Yeah.
And so, they were just, we couldn't do, and at this point, we're in the process of negotiating a new joint venture agreement with Good Life Fitness.
Yeah.
And that got, like, we weren't going to agree to it. Like, none of us were agree. They're ready to go. We're like disagreeing and in amongst our own group.
Yeah.
We couldn't agree on, salaries for people. We couldn't agree on, a go forward. We couldn't agree on development priorities. We couldn't agree on who to hire and who to fire.
Yeah.
It basically just neutered the company.
Yeah.
So the 2 of them
standstill.
So the 2 of them just walked out. And so, that's a really difficult thing to deal with. So I was the CEO at the time. And what do you do? Like, you've essentially, and we were still in development mode. So we were
Good Life.
For Good Life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have a guaranteed contract there, but you can't do anything to actually.
Yeah. And we weren't going to be able to go back to our former clients. And I had already started having some conversations with them. We were out there potentially looking at raising a little bit of capital to see if we can get over that first hurdle. And it just became this, really awkward phase where, there was a point when I just said to Jeff, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, I'm out. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to go get a job somewhere.
And how long was this going on for?
So this lasted for the tension was there, but it lasted for a while. So there was a triggering event, and I probably have just blocked it on my head, where they essentially just got up and left.
Yeah.
And so now one of them was kind of playing this intermediary and trying to figure out what this looked. And then out of the blue, we get a shotgun offer, one person. So Jeff gets a shotgun offer from one of these guys to buy out his shares.
Yeah.
And
but
I
even with
should
his
take a
shares,
step.
they wouldn't have enough voting power.
No, but again, it's like if you're going to pick somebody off. So
Okay.
I was never quite sure what the motivation was.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't understand.
I think the motivation was because, kind of leading up to that shotgun offer, and myself and the one individual who was trying to have these reasonable conversations.
Yeah.
The number that they were floating to us to acquire, to buy them out, was a stupid number.
Yeah.
Like they were essentially holding us hostage. They didn't put any money into the company. They are acquiring it essentially through sweat equity. So lessons learned for myself. And they wanted a stupid amount of money to be bought out.
Yeah.
At a very short period of time. And I just said that's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to happen. So I know the shotgun offer was, I think, to try to trigger something to force a conversation around what a buyout number was going to be.
Yeah.
So anyways, they didn't follow the rules. We had to get another legal team involved. We had to present them with, listen, this isn't how it works. But in the long and the run, like we basically had this, like, to wait them out. We just said, listen, we'll just shut this down. We're just going to put it on the shelf.
You get nothing.
All inform Good Life that
Yeah.
they should go a different direction. And Jeff and I and Brandon are going to go back to InnoSoft LLC and start again.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can renegotiate with Good Life independently.
Yeah.
So you're just gonna, and I know that I could go back to our old clients in the universities and colleges, and we will figure out how to make this work, but you two will not be involved. And so I just said, we'll just wait you out. So we basically went into this standstill for what at the time felt like forever. And it
months or?
It was, yeah, like I think from start to finish, it probably stretched over like 3 months.
Yeah. And Good Life's waiting for their product and you're wanting to move forward, and
the team kept building.
Yeah.
Right. They just kept building. So I instructed them to keep building. That didn't need shareholder approval.
Yeah.
But no deals could be made.
Yeah. You
like
can't bring on additional staff and yeah.
Yeah. You couldn't go to get a bank loan. Like there's nothing you could do. Like you basically were just fulfilling your obligation at that point.
Yeah.
But, it was a really, really awkward position. And so we just had to wait it out. And then eventually, I can't remember the secret exactly, but the gentleman reached out and I said, okay, well, given the shotgun, here's what we're prepared to offer you to walk away. Full releases and all that stuff. And it was not a lot of money. And I think at that point they just decided, okay, they're not going to twist, they're not going to bend.
Something's better than nothing, because you already told
something's
them. Yeah, we'll hang up our skates right now, right?
Yeah. So that basically cost, it was the closest I would say that we got to a point where we were just going to shut down.
Yeah, because you even said you were about to walk out one day.
Yeah, I said, well, the thing is, I said to Jeff, like, I'm out, and he's like, well, whoa, like, if you're out, then I'm out, and you can just tell, like, it was just going to all, fade away. And then, as it turns out, that kind of put a lot of resolution into Jeff and I and Brandon at the time to, okay, like, we're going to be very cautious about who we bring in as outside investors. We're going to do this on our own. It changed the path. And so by the time we ended up selling InnoSoft, Jeff and I owned, 89% of it.
Yeah. You weren't taking that risk again, right?
Yeah. But, there's lots of different, we've talked many times about different ways to grow your company, but, those experiences, the first acquisition where the company essentially didn't really honor the spirit of the agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the next phase with InnoSoft, these initial shareholders didn't really honor the intent of why they were brought in.
Yeah.
And so that's why, I talk to people about, really think twice about when you bring on outside investors and what that actually means. And, I use the phrase, it's easy to plan for success, but harder to plan for failure. That includes who your shareholders are, who your shareholder agreements are. What does that look like? What does that mean? Because everybody talks about, oh, we're going to be here and here. Nobody ever talks about when things start to get tense and not good, it's going to fall back on this paper. Sure, lawyers love to hear that, but I had a very similar experience when I become a part of the pro sports teams that I was involved with as an owner. It's the same thing. Everybody goes in with really good intentions, but when it starts to get a little bit ugly, you're very reliant on these pieces of paper that you're building. So as my lesson that I'm trying to share is that, that's a part that people don't really think about clearly. They focus really, we have to have enough money, and which I agree with.
Yeah.
But there's another side to it too, which is, who your partners are, the agreements that you have in place, and what happens when, things start to go sideways. What's a path forward?
Did this make you?
It can get pretty nasty.
Yeah, and you need that legal foundation that, like you're saying, you need to fall back on, and it comes down to those pieces of paper, that 25-page shareholder agreement. Did this make you despise the legal part of things, or actually enjoy it more, where you like reading those shareholder agreements, you like reading those term sheets, and actually reviewing the legal side of things?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny though, because does it just make me a pessimist or a skeptic?
Yeah.
I would say that I'm more cautious about that, but yes, I do tend to read those with much more detail.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's difficult to do is to kind of map out scenarios. So if this happens, then what would happen if I read the agreement? And if this happens, then what happened, right? So, you do tend to, and that's the kind of the advice that I try to give forward when I'm working with companies through RH or whatever. I try to go into some of that stuff if they want it or if they ask for it. But yeah, it definitely, it's seared an impression on my brain for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, lawyers, a lot of people don't like the whole lawyer thing. My wife's a lawyer, but the reality is that it is really important. If I look back on those companies, I'd wish I had better legal advice earlier and better accounting advice earlier.
Yeah.
But when you're young, as far as a company and maturity of the company, and you don't have a lot of cash, you just can't wrap your head.
Yeah.
You just can't wrap your head around spending that money.
Yeah. And it is going through this process yourself, and myself going through that legal process of starting a company early on. You try to cut corners in legal and accounting, but like you've shown with your example, and I've seen in my businesses, when you cut corners early on, they come back 3 to 4 to 5 years later, and they can hurt, and they'll cost you more. You should have just invested early on into that good legal framework and good accounting framework early on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing about partners too, is, it's better to have those upfront conversations with them, and just, and really understand who your partners are. That's why it's also really important to understand when you're taking on outside investment, because they become your partners.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? So yeah, that's why I often say, it's great to raise money, but make sure you're raising it from the right source.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's often why you see, in your example, co-founders stick around for a while with each other, from business to business to business. It's because they know they can trust the other one. They've already gone through it with them, rather than trying to find someone new to get in that foxhole with, right? Yeah. Why you brought Jeff around. Yeah. You and Jeff ran around together.
And even with Roundhouse, I'd known Joe and David for 20 years.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not like I just all of a sudden picked out people I don't know to start this new endeavor.
Yeah.
It's like I'm working with people that I've known for a long time, and the people that even we bring in and supporting through our age, we typically have a relationship with in some shape or form. But yeah, so it's pretty natural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Brian, great story. We have the development of B&W and building B&W being brought on while working for Western, and then the exit of B&W, the exit not going the best for anybody involved, both sides, right? It ended up being resold later on. But in that time, you had started up another business and brought on Good Life, which then turned into the development of a product very similar to what you were offering, a rec management software in InnoSoft. And then InnoSoft early on, and kind of that transition from the Good Life to the university side, saw that down but not out moment and a near-death experience. And like you're saying, a very interesting one of, it wasn't really revenue based. It was the fact that no one, the shareholders wouldn't agree on how to move forward, and it nearly killed the business. You almost walked away. The other two already did walk away, and you had to get kind of crafty and really put the offer on the table and say, this is it. Otherwise we walk away and no one gets anything. And then that turned out to be the right decision, because InnoSoft 2017 was able to exit, works with, like you said, 300 universities and 300 plus universities and other facilities across North America. So a big success. Like you said, you and Jeff ended up owning near 90% near the end. A nice exit for yourselves, and for a good story for London and Southwestern Ontario. So overall, a really good story. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's all for this episode, everyone. Thank you for sharing your story again, Brian. If you're listening right now, please leave us a review, as they really do help drive awareness for the show. Also, subscribe to the show to be alerted of new episodes. And finally, like and share this episode on social media with your friends. Help us spread the word of Down But Not Out. Thanks again, Brian.
You got it.